Hi everybody, welcome to Fresh Outlook, the show where we're talking about what you're talking about. I'm your host Taryn Brill, but just call me TWB. On today's show, we'll begin by discussing Pope Benedict XVI's bombshell announcement. He's stepping down. We'll get into the cause and the effects. Then we'll tackle President Obama's State of the Union address, the highlights, the reactions, and the surprises. And finally, there's a huge protest scheduled in Washington tomorrow. It's the largest climate change rally in history, in hopes that President Obama will reject the building of the Keystone Pipeline. We'll look at both sides of this extremely controversial debate. But before we get the conversation started, let's meet this week's all-star panel. Good to see everybody. Let's begin with Father Gadenz. Tell us your name, where you're from, and why you decided to join us today.
Yeah, I'm Father Pablo Gadenz. I'm a professor. I'm a Catholic priest. I'm an associate professor in the School of Theology at Seton Hall University. And I studied in Rome when Pope Benedict was elected, so I have a special affinity to his thought.
Terrific. Can't wait to get into that. Excellent.
Certificate.
Also joining us is Dr. Rossi.
I'm a political psychologist. I like to take a look at world leaders and politicians and how they're coming across, how they're projecting their message, what their appeal is like, their own personalities.
Terrific. All right, well, great to have you guys here. We'll get into the conversation in just a moment. But earlier this week, Pope Benedict XVI announced he's resigning. It's an announcement that no other pope has made in half a millennium. Take a look.
It was the moment that almost 1.5 billion Catholics around the world had been waiting for.
Habemus Papam. Cardinale Ratzinger.
April the 19th, 2005. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger was named Pope Benedict XVI. The intellectual theorist from Germany had been chosen to succeed the charismatic John Paul II at age 78.
Ed ecco Papa Benedetto.
Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti.
But then came a scandal so big that it rocked the entire Catholic Church. An announcement that Vatican officials were involved in covering up several abuse cases committed by priests against children. During a visit to the United States, Benedict XVI became the first pope to make a public apology for the atrocities.
It's difficult for me to understand how it was possible that priests betrayed in this way their mission to give healing, to give love of the God to these children. We are deeply ashamed, and we will do all the possible that this cannot happen in future.
For many, this may be Pope Benedict's greatest legacy.
One thing is certain, he is the man who dared to restore the image of the Church. Within the Church, as with other institutions, there will always be good and bad things. But Pope Benedict XVI will improve the Church's image like no other pope has done before.
But others were less complimentary. Aside from the paedophilia scandal, he was also criticised for his conservative ideology. Many accused him of being out of touch with the 21st century.
I love those accents, by the way, but I digress just a little bit. 1.2 billion Catholics are holding their breath after this announcement was made. We'll get into his legacy in just a moment, but first, I mean, can a pope resign? I was under the impression that he has this job for life. So what is the case?
Yes, the Pope is elected for life, and most popes remain Pope until they die, but the resignation of a Pope is actually foreseen in the Church's law. The Church's law is codified in a code of canon law, and you can look it up. It's Canon 332, paragraph 2. It says that the Pope can resign, and
So he can resign.
He can resign. It's already foreseen that he can do so. He just has to make it manifest and do so freely, which is exactly what he did with his announcement on February 11th. Now, he is the first pope in about 600 years to resign, so it's not that common.
Right.
But perhaps it's due to the modern demands of the papacy and realizing his own frailty. He will be 86 in April, and so realizing the demands of the job, both physically and mentally, he thought it was best for the good of the Church to step aside.
Yeah, just to your point, the last pope to step down before his death was Gregory XII. Back in 1415.
1415.
So it's been quite some time. Dr. Rossi, what do you think?
As a psychologist, I think it is a good thing. I think he deserves credit.
Okay.
I think he should get some credit for really presenting himself in a way that's human. He doesn't think he can go on. He doesn't think he can make a good impact for the Church. So I give him a lot of positives on this, actually. I think it's sad, but on but same token, I think he should get an A+ for
I agree.
actually,
You know, and he says, you know, his mind's not as sharp as it used to be, but obviously it was sharp enough for him to say, look,
Right.
I can't meet the demands of this job anymore.
Sure.
It's time to close up the shop. So I think it's a real lesson in humility. But some on the other side of the coin, some people say no, he should stay there forever. You know, this is such a high, you know, a deity
Not today.
type.
Not
today.
in today's society, with the electronic age and with everything being in your face out there. I think he's making a good move for the church.
Okay, what do you think?
Plus,
Was this a good move? I
yes,
mean,
plus
do you support what he did?
Remember that Pope Benedict worked with Pope John Paul for 25 years of his papacy, and so Pope Benedict witnessed, as Cardinal Ratzinger, he witnessed the decline in health of Pope John Paul, and
Right.
so he was afraid perhaps that something similar would happen to him. There is also a history of strokes in his family. He had a minor stroke some years ago, and so perhaps he was fearful of a debilitating stroke that would render his ability to do the Petrine
Sure.
ministry rendered him ineffective. And so I think it's a very humble decision to step aside.
It shows a deep love for the church, I
Right.
think, as well. Let's talk a little bit about his legacy. They touched upon that in the piece just a little bit. Positives and negatives. I mean, he's pretty conservative. However, is his legacy overshadowed by the sex scandal and, in the Catholic Church, relations, off the cuff remarks about Muslims and Jews? And what do you think? How will he be remembered?
I think he will be remembered in a very positive way. Of course, legacies sometimes take years to fully develop, and some of the fruits of Pope Benedict's papacy will be seen perhaps years from now. I think the greatest part of his legacy is his teaching. He is such a clear teacher because he was a professor in German universities for over 20 years before becoming a bishop, and he has an ability to explain complicated theological truths in very down-to-earth terms. And so remember not only his teaching as Pope, but he worked with Pope John Paul for over 25 years. So all of that work that he did, going back to the Second Vatican Council, where he was a theological expert back in the 1960s. So it's more than 50 years of theological teaching that he's contributed to the Roman Catholic Church. And that's going to be a very long-lasting legacy. And he also has personally a great humility, serenity, and joy. Anyone who has seen him, heard him speak, is struck by how gentle and calm and serene he is. He's a joyful person.
His demeanor.
His demeanor, which contrasts with the image that sometimes is portrayed of him of being the Pope's God's bulldog or Rottweiler, because he's German and because he's known to be a conservative theologian. Rather, his manner is very gentle and calm and serene, and it reflects, I think, a certain holiness of life.
I agree. I agree. How do you feel? What do you think the highlight of his legacy will be?
I differ a little bit.
Good.
I really feel that he's projected himself as kind of a medieval type pope in the past traditions
Well, that's what they
of the
said.
church.
He's kind of out of touch
And
with modern times.
I don't see him as really being in touch. I agree. I see him as being very conservative and not giving enough really to women, to folks who are not really accepted by the church, gays and gay marriage, and
does that matter to modern day Catholics, though?
I think it does. I think there are a lot of Catholics who believe in...
Or the majority, we should say, of modern day
I think
Catholics.
a lot of Catholics believe in the church, but they know that they separate in many different diverse areas. They part with the church on some issues. And I don't think that this Pope has really been as good as Pope John Paul in presenting himself in a way that really people relate to in terms of being more progressive.
So what should he have done? Are there specific examples? I mean, things that he should have done differently that you can share with us?
I think he could have been more positive about women, their contributions to society, where they're going, less traditional. Pope John Paul surrounded himself with kids, with children. He was more vivacious, more outgoing. And I think if this Pope had projected himself as someone who wanted to make some progressive changes, even if they weren't too much, but some progressive moves, he would have come across much better.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with just only a small portion of what he said. I certainly agree.
I was hoping you didn't, because I'd like to get some context.
There's a great contrast in personality. Certainly, Pope John Paul is a very charismatic, outgoing individual. Pope Benedict is a shy, a retiring, more introverted fellow. But we have to also understand the nature of the office. The office of the Pope is one who is inherently conservative in the sense that he's not creating doctrine. He's just handing on the tradition the Catholic teaching that comes from Scripture and
We
tradition.
should just say, if you're not of the faith, for 70% of the world's population, he is Christ's chosen representative on earth. Is that accurate?
He is viewed as the successor of Peter. In the New Testament, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says to Peter, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build the church." And with that passage and other passages related to Peter, there's a sense of an office that continues by which the head bishop in the line of Peter strengthens the brothers, as it says in the Gospel of Luke. And so we believe as Catholics, he's just a man, but he has been chosen with a special task to lead the church.
And in terms of that leadership, though, when you look at the different demeanors and the types of popes, do you have a favorite? do you think there's an ideal that's
Well,
been
each person
set?
brings his own gifts. I was ordained a priest during the time of Pope John Paul. I was ordained in 1996, but I happened to study in Rome and get my doctorate during the time of Pope Benedict. And I came to love both of them, and I've studied their writings. I've given talks about them, taught courses related to their teaching. And so I love them in a different way. But for me, they were both God's gift to the church for that particular time.
Okay. Do you think that what was discussed in that piece, though, do you think his legacy will be tainted and sort of overshadowed by these scandals as opposed to the positive impact that he had? What do you think, Dr. Rossi?
I think so to some extent, because I think that there has not been enough emphasis on dealing with this crisis, with the priest crisis.
Yeah.
If you think about it, they talk a lot, the church talks a lot about what people should not do. Even if it's women, or if it's gays, or if it's anything that's controversial, they'll push that aside. They want to go by the rules, the regulations, and the traditions of the church. And I think that the Catholic Church would be much better off being a little bit more progressive and looking at where society is going. Society is not moving in the same direction that the church is standing in.
Well, just some of the things, just to list some of the, some of the things that people are saying could possibly overshadow his legacy. Obviously, we talked about the sex abuse scandal. Communication.
I'd like to clarify something about that.
Okay, what's it? Communication gaps with Jews and Muslims. He fell short in failing to establish relations with China. Also, that Butler scandal where documents were released, and also sort of reconciling breakaway Catholics, sort of these schisms.
Right. Well, this is where there are a lot of projects.
So you wanted to clarify
the
sex
about
scandal?
the sex abuse scandal. Even before becoming Pope, as Cardinal Ratzinger, he is the one that instituted reforms in the law of the Church to deal with these issues. Some of this may not be as well known, but there are cases from the 1990s with the Archbishop of Vienna at the time, and it was Cardinal Ratzinger's intervention with Pope John Paul that led to the removal of that archbishop, and he is the one that instituted norms for handling these cases. And then he continued that even once he became Pope. The last years of Pope John Paul's pontificate, when he was in frail health, he perhaps didn't have the energy to deal with these issues. But Pope Benedict has really been a reformer in that regard, and I think the truth of that will come out as time goes on.
I would say that reformer is not, in a certain sense, okay, I'll grant you that one from my point of view. But I really don't see him as a reformer. I see him as more of a traditionalist, and I think that's part of his problem. He has not really projected himself as a real reformer, as someone stepping up and moving where
You're not a fan.
society.
You're not a fan, Doctor.
I like Pope John because I think that he had a sense of him, and he projected a personality that was a winning personality. Where this Pope does not project to me as a winning personality.
Back to the young people you were talking.
Is it about personality?
A lot of it on the national stage.
Is that at the forefront?
On the national stage, I think it is.
Yeah.
But Pope Benedict continued the tradition of Pope John Paul of having these international gatherings for young people, these World Youth Day, or for young adults as well. And Pope Benedict, I attended some during the time of Pope John Paul, one in Rome and one in Toronto. Pope Benedict held 3 of these. The last one was in Spain, the others were in Germany, and one in Australia. The one in Spain, there were 2 million young people. All right, so he did connect with young people to some extent.
Is he on Facebook?
He's on Twitter.
He's on Twitter.
He's on Twitter. That's another innovation.
He's using
the social
steps.
media.
He's
really
a smartphone.
looking for innovative ways to try to
We have to transition just a moment, because the next topic we want to discuss is his successor. Obviously, that's the big buzz topic right now. 118 cardinals will be electing a successor. So we do have a quick piece we want to throw to. Take a look.
The question that many people will have is, where do they come from? What countries, right? It's going to be an Italian pope after 2 non-Italian popes, or a Latin American pope, given that there's so many Catholics in Latin America, or one of the emerging Catholic countries in Africa or Asia. Those are all possibilities, and I have no idea what the Holy Spirit has in mind for the Church.
What do you? So you're laughing. What?
No, I'm saying it's good that we have some discussion.
Oh, it's great. No, we love it. That's why it's called a fresh outlook, as opposed to the same outlooks. How do you feel about having possibly the first non-European pope? That would be accurate, right?
No, it wouldn't be the first non-European
Okay.
pope. I mean, certainly in the times of the early church, we had
or modern day.
In the modern day,
Yes.
perhaps in a long time, certainly. Yes, a number of the candidates that are being mentioned as leading candidates come from other parts of the world. There's a discussion that perhaps the next pope will be from Latin America or from Africa. And those are 2 continents where the Catholic Church is experiencing growth.
Huge growth. 42% of the world's Catholics are in Latin America.
That's right. And so rather than have another pope from Europe where there's a certain decline or a stagnation, perhaps certainly not as much growth, there's some talk about the possibility of a pope from one of these other countries. Now it's interesting because some candidates can sort of bridge the continental divide. I mean, there's one candidate that's being mentioned. He's from Canada, actually, so that's not European, but we still consider that kind of North America. But he worked in Latin America, and now he's been working in Rome, Mark Willett. Or there's an Argentinian cardinal who's also been working in Rome.
Who do you think's the front runner? Is there one?
Really, is anyone the Cardinals decide, I'm sure will be the right choice, but that seems to be the one.
So anyone will suffice?
Well, obviously among the 118, there are some that probably because of age will not be elected because they might be.
But I do want to point out, though, given what he's just done, it's kind of like, if I take the job, I'm not committed for life. Right? I mean, that's what he's saying.
That's right. I think they'll choose a candidate who's a little bit younger, maybe in his 60s. Certainly, it's rare that you have someone very young. Pope John Paul was only 58 when he was elected. But the front runners seem to be the front runners. The ones that are mentioned more frequently seem to be, for example, Mark Willett, who's from Canada, but he works in Rome, but he also had experience teaching in Latin America. Peter Turkson, who's the African cardinal, who works in Rome, but he's from Ghana. An Italian candidate that's sometimes mentioned is Angelo Scola, who's the Archbishop of Milan in northern Italy. And that's the largest diocese.
Real quickly, we have about 20 seconds left. Do you have a pick? Do you think an African or a Latin American pope will make a difference? Is that what we need? The world needs?
I've written an article on a winning campaign for politicians and a winning personality. I'm not really concerned with where someone comes from.
Okay.
I'm concerned about how they project their personality as a winning personality for the church.
So it doesn't matter. Okay, guys. Well, very good. Right. We could go on and on and on. I had like a zillion more questions, but we got to go to break. When we come back, we'll react to the President's State of the Union address. That's next on Fresh Outlook. Stay with us.